I'm Samuel. Margaret Ann.
Then what you went after Samuel?
But I thought that was interesting because I think they thought it was the debt is written something. So if
Ain't no
you
more
took me to court and you wanted to
After Samuel.
monetary judgment and I didn't pay you,
Samuel Strong, Margaret Ann.
you can turn around and issue the rest. Caboose.
Yeah, then we gotta pay to take care of it. I got my hand on my hip, did you see that? Guess what? My daughter and my granddaughter,
And she gave me all this money. She used to run the store and she just let me write a check on her. Tell me to go down, got run 3, 4, 5 times.
Doing that 2 weeks.
I'm Wally.
He's a big one, and I appreciate it. We didn't know. Somebody told me you did.
Clarence Sidney was my dad, my grandfather. Ima Grace Barrett was my grandmother. Reba was my dad's youngest sister. Reba was born later on in life. Unfortunately, she died of cancer. My grandmother had a stroke and lived 11 years, roughly, paralyzed on one side, in a wheelchair. They could have done probably more now than they did back then, but they did what they could. Grandpa was out on the farm. Didn't come back in one day. They found him. He had a heart attack and died right out on the farm, which he was probably thrilled beyond words. He was a self-taught veterinarian, believed in going by the sign of the moon, whether it was planting, raising your kids, working cattle, you did everything by the sign of the moon. And by God, it worked. I got to tell you, I weaned every one of my children by the sign of the moon, and there was no problem. They farmed, had a little farm. They had a steam engine, which that'll go in the story about Daddy. But the kids still own the steam engine. My dad has the original check. It was one of the things they found when they cleaned out the house. Grandma had a fit about him buying this steam engine. Paid $600 for the steam engine. It's one of the things they found. He has the check, the canceled check, where they bought the steam engine. It's out north of Ellsbury. They have an old Thrashers Association in Lincoln County, which my dad is just involved in. I can talk about him. He's not here, can't I? I can do all this.
He'd like to be here, but
I know he would like to be here, but he's doing well this morning. I talked to him. But still has the steam engine in the family. So they ran a sawmill, used it to go thrashing locally when the boys were young. I can remember as a kid going out to Grandma and Grandpa's, and they would hook a belt up, not to the steam engine, but to a tractor to saw firewood, and they'd at least get one plank and stick it through the boards of the fence so we could seesaw and stay out of their way, I now realize. But back then I just thought it was for fun, but they could count heads and knew where our skids were. Grandma's 5 brothers are buried. She was the oldest, and she had 5 brothers. And this is important because the farm we're going to now, the people who live there now, Karen and Larry, we've talked about them a little bit. Her mother, over here, Wallace, that's her grandparents. So her mom and daddy are first cousins. Uncle Wallace, or the Barretts and the Gladneys. The farm that we're going on is what they originally called the Gladney Stock Farm. Her dad, she was a Shannon, her dad comes in on the Gladney side. But at one point, Uncle Wallace owned part of that farm. So the Barretts and the Gladneys get twisted around a little bit more. Grandpa did not want to be buried here. Grandpa wanted to be buried where we're going next.
On the stock farm.
On the stock farm. Grandma told him the big convincing selling point was these trees were about tall as I am at the time. And he'd have trees. And I don't know how you all get along in your marriage and stuff, but if the wife finally says it, then that's kind of the way you do it. So, and so she had the say. So she's buried here with her 5 brothers. Out of all of them, several of them never had any children. Grandma had 4. That was the most any of them had. Uncle Wallace and Aunt Nita had 1. Uncle Lloyd had 1. Uncle Charles had 2 daughters. Uncle Warren and his wife didn't have any, and Uncle Dee and Aunt Anna Lee didn't either. So the Barretts, Neil, grew up around Silver River State Park. That's where the Barretts grew. And a lot of the Barretts are buried in Thornhill Cemetery.
I have, my
Okay.
great-grandfather is buried in Thornhill.
Okay, you know where I'm talking about. Clarence Sidney had a brother and a sister. Aunt Delphi is buried right over here, where it says Rainey. Aunt Delphi married a real veterinarian, Dr. Rainey, Dr. Jim Rainey. And 2 of her children are buried right next to them, the Ransdell and the Rainey, daughter and a son. The other daughter is buried in California. I think Gay's showing up. I think Gay's coming. I don't know if Jimmy's coming or not, but a couple of them may be there later on. Aunt Delphi lived at Winfield, which from here is take 47 to 79, you're in Winfield. We went to school in Winfield. Aunt Delphi, God love her, drove a little Ford Falcon. I'm talking when I was 12, 13. I never knew somebody could kill an automatic till I saw Aunt Delphi drive. Where we lived goes right out on 79, and she would stop by to see us. She would also come to school and just embarrass the heck out of us, and they would pull us out of class because Aunt Delphi came by to say hi. Little small town school, sorry. But Aunt Delphi would come to see us, and my sister Sydney and I would have to go and stand out by the edge of 79 to tell her when it was clear to get on the road. If that doesn't put the fear of God in you, then, but she could kill an automatic. But, oh yeah, there she go, you know. What else do I need to add? The other brother, Clarence's other brother, is buried out there. Forrest Colby. And Uncle Colby died in a car accident. Had not married or anything, and he is buried out on the farm out there. Probably, this is probably getting close to one of the last funerals out there. There are other Gladneys scattered around in here because we seem to multiply like everybody else. There are several other cemeteries up in that area, and there are Gladneys there, so if anybody needs help finding or wants to know about some of them, we'll get you in the right direction or take you there or anything. But the one we're going to go see is on what they originally called the Gladney Stock Farm. In the book somewhere, I think it talks about the water lilies at one time. When one of them got married, they didn't get married like we do now. They got married, and then some of them even went back home and stayed all night with their folks before they moved into their house, or they didn't have a house to move into. And supposedly, as the story goes, when one of the Gladneys got married and they were going across by the pond on the horse and buggy, that's where she threw her flowers, and that's where the water lilies came from. They no longer exist, but that's the legend anyhow. Oh, what else, Sandy?
So Clarence
Clarence Sidney.
Karen will be at the, we're buried at the Carl Shannon Farm. Thornhill.
I think so. Yeah, because the Barretts are
Thornhill.
on Thornhill. Yes.
Which one of the four brothers is this
Samuel?
family from?
Richard.
Richard.
Through Kentucky, up this way. Daddy had, and he gave it to Forrest's son, because Daddy, of course, didn't have any sons. He had, I can tell this, it's interesting. He had, I remember Mr. Oliver, he'll think it's all right. He had an anvil that they brought with them. Some of the first Gladneys that came to Missouri brought with them. And Forrest's son Leroy has it. So it stays with the Gladneys. Forrest had two sons. Carl Jean died when he was about 50. Him and I were the same age, so about 10 years ago. Carl Jean's wife died a year and a half after he did. They are buried, there's a Catholic cemetery in Troy, and Jan was Catholic and he joined the church, and that's where they're buried. He's over there. He has two sons that live in Troy. Can't force people to come see us, and we can't point them out, but Daddy's sister who passed away, Aunt Ruby,
my cousin.
last year and a half ago, her and her husband are buried at Hawk Point Cemetery, in the Catholic cemetery at Hawk Point. And his brother Bill, that passed away several years ago, is buried in Bowling Green. Bill married, this is confusing, he married a Fraser, and there were Frasers that lived close. Anyhow, that's where they settled and lived, is in Bowling Green, Missouri. But Daddy's the oldest, and then Daddy and Forrest and Ruby and Bill and Retta. Retta's Bill's wife. She's still living in Bowling Green, and then Reba. But it's kind of been a rough couple of years for him to see his siblings all go.
What part of Kentucky did they come through? What came to Missouri?
Well, there's a Lincoln County, Kentucky, so I think they probably came through Lincoln County, Kentucky.
That's
Yeah, a lot of them did. Basically, they followed Daniel Boone's footsteps around.
I think that was the first and only county for a while in Kentucky.
Yeah. And there is, believe it or not, in the state of Oregon, there's a Lincoln County, because when we went out there, my daughter thought it was just fascinating. We were at the coast, and going down, look at the water, and this sheriff's car pulls up and it says Lincoln County, Oregon. So she starts to take a picture of it, and the nice officer got out and said, "What are you doing?" And we explained where we were from, and he was very gracious and let her take a picture of Lincoln County, Oregon and everything, and told us to have a great trip and so forth. But it was like, why are you taking a picture of my cop car?
I've got the area that they were in.
You mentioned Daniel Boone, Maryland.
One of the sons went up into
Her
Indiana.
ancestors, Captain Billy.
But the way we're connected is my great-grandmother was Gladney, daughter of John William and Sarah Ann, and they're both buried here. I started it back there in that house, the old house that Samuel Gladney built. It's gone now. There's still some of the foundation, the old rock. But it was right here in this road. Yeah, I remember we did do that. So you have to ask them.
Okay, let me see if I can tell you. Probably can. Oh, yeah. This is
Yes.
This is Margaret.
Margaret Gladney.
Abraham A. Eads Chandler. He's buried over in Auburn. And so this is my great.
What's that say down bottom?
Give me your email. I can send it to you.
Really?
That way you don't have to take your own pictures. I tried to get it to print out like a composite, and it's just all too small. So I'd be happy to send it to anybody. I'll take you up on that. Okay. Clamanda, but look under it. His wife. Know if that was her making a statement or just she couldn't be there that day, but they. But I'll. But that he must have been one that had a stone that was here before a lot of the others.
It's 1882, 1860. Is that 62 or 82?
Yeah, well, it's given.
You don't want it? You good?
How y'all doing? I'm Kathy. You're the editor. I am. You're the editor. I am. I got something for you. Good. Can I sit over there by you? What's your name?
Hang out on the side that didn't have water. And
I
they
told her
bought
she
this
may
house.
be the oldest lady here today.
Yeah. That's some longevity on that line.
You just,
There really
And
is.
Pippin
so
is-
you're 96 and she's
That's
93.
wonderful.
and
Two. That's awesome. In our family.
in the other house.
And then there's
That's okay. It's working good.
Right.
Jake's on the
Yeah, are they making?
Right.
we didn't know
I know.
Guarantee. I grew up with black walnut.
It smells so good. Oh, yeah. Hey, John, come on, man. Let's go.
I'm Tim Johnson. This is my son Trent.
Hey.
I'm Tim. This is my son Trent. This is my other son Tim. And we live in Stanford, Kentucky, in the Samuel line.
And for those of you that don't know, Tim is our database manager. If you have any changes to make, additions, Tim's the person you need to talk to. Thank you, Tim.
I'm Jason Gladney from Ellsbury, Missouri. This is my daughter Naomi, my daughter Eva, and I have two boys around here somewhere, Forrest and Eli. There's Eli.
Mr. Gladney, John.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm John Gladney. I was born in Fitzgerald, Georgia, and raised in Tipton, Georgia. And that's in South Georgia where the flies and the mosquitoes and the gnats are. So keep your windows rolled up when you go through. We do. We now live in Winder, Georgia, which is just east of west of Athens and east of Atlanta.
And he does have a wife named
My wife Meryl. My better half.
And John was the first president of the Gladney Association when they first started it back in the 70s.
I'm Marlo Wing. My mom was Ruby Gladney. This is my wife, Ruthie. I'm from Troy right here, so. Born and raised in Troy.
went to school.
Went to school in this building.
Oh.
Charles Sidney?
Daddy?
I'm Charlie Gladney from Foley, and I'm past president of the association in 93 and 94. Good fellow.
Terry? You want to go next?
Sydney, go ahead.
I'm Sydney, and I'm Daddy's, that's my dad.
Number one daughter.
I'm the oldest daughter, and this is my husband Larry. We live in Washington, Missouri, which is about 60 miles south of here. And we have a drought going on there too, like prayed for, which I really appreciate. Thank you.
I'm Terry Burkemper, my husband Gene. We live up at Kirksville, which is about 150 miles north of here. I'm daughter number 2.
I'm Charles Kemper. I'm not a Gladney. I live four blocks from here. It's my wife, Mary Ann.
I'm Sandy, sometimes known as Sandra Kay, but that's in a different part of the country. I'm Charles Sidney's youngest daughter, or number 4 of 4. This is my partner Linda, and we live in Eugene, Oregon, which is about 2,100 and something miles from here.
I'd say you traveled farther.
I'm Neil Chandler. I was born in Troy, but I only lived here about 3 years. I live in Mountain Home, Arkansas right now. I worked in Springfield, Illinois for some 35 years. And I love coming back to Troy.
We're glad to have you.
I'm Wally Gladney from Lexington, Kentucky. And this is my wife, Dean. We're from the Samuel line, and originally from Alabama. But we've lived there 47 years.
And Wally's a past president also.
I'm daughter number 3 to Charles. I'm Carla, my husband Ron, and we live in Columbia, Missouri, about 2 hours west of here.
I'm another Wally Gladney from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and one of the past presidents here. Good to be here with all of y'all.
He's our current treasurer, so if there's any money, send it to him. Dues, everything.
I'm Bonnie Evans. I'm Charlie Gladney's neighbor.
Oh my God.
I'm her husband.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Fend for yourself.
I'm Dan Gladney, my wife Judy. We're from the Samuel line, and we're from Georgia, but we presently live in Southwest Florida, and it's great to be with all of you. Really good.
And Dan's another past president.
My name's Tony Adams. My great-great-grandmother was Mary Elizabeth Gladney, who married James Kennard Adams, and I'm from Franklin, Georgia.
And I'm Kathy Newman. I'm the editor of the Gladney Graham and the current president for a few more minutes. And this is my husband, Jimmy. We're from Newnan, Georgia. And we want to thank the Charles Sidney Gladney family for a wonderful weekend. We enjoyed the whole weekend. The whole family participated this afternoon. You all cooked and you all served, and you're all wonderful people. We thank you. And we're gonna read the minutes from the last meeting?
Oh, yes.
Mama, do we have to do that?
Oh, did I catch you unawares?
No, I caught myself unaware. Fun.
Sorry.
Pay attention here. Not a problem. Let's see.
Just so you know.
What?
Okay. Wonderful. You know, it's been just an absolute fun weekend. I really appreciate all of you, and especially Charles and your family, and you and Jean, and all the girls. You familiar with a big, thick blue supplemental genealogy book? Have you seen that? Some of you seen that? If you haven't, that book is a wonderful book. It has a lot of great information about all the families. And I'm not sure, well anyway, Tim Johnson is responsible for organizing that and putting it in. He did a great job there. Tim, thank you very much. It's absolutely wonderful. We are blessed to have such people like Mildred Gladney Arnold and her husband Tom that started this, and it's just great. Okay, not bad about, I guess I've got the Gladney stuff in me. Start off on something else. It should be. I'm going to read the Gladney's in America Board of Directors meeting minutes from last year, so you know where we are and what things we're looking at and what we're doing. The association's board meeting was held July the 30th, 2011, 5 p.m. in the meeting room of Fairfield Motel in Winsboro, South Carolina. Hope all of you can be there with us next year. Kathy Newman, President, presided. Meeting attendees were Wally Gladney, Kentucky, Larry Ivins, Dan Gladney, C. Wallace Gladney, Baton Rouge, Tim Johnson, Charles Sidney Gladney, Kathy Newman, Lucille Gladney Brooks from Florida, Terry Burkemper, she was there, and Jim Newman was our guest photographer. And I read the minutes from the 2010 board meeting. C. Wallace reported that the GIA, Gladney's in America, account remains in excellent financial condition, much better than the U.S., I should say. And we had a trade report attached to that. The business notes. Kathy reported that the association bylaws allows for the annual reunion to be held at any time and place to accommodate the reunion host if approved by the board of directors. In other words, if we come to Missouri, then you can set the time and date, not unlike in Winsboro where it's always the last weekend of July. Wally Gladney so noted that this time in last week in July was requested by Mildred Gladney Arnold, who wrote our genealogy with her husband Tom, and was the first Gladney's in American Reunion there at that time. C. Wallace proposed to increase the donation to the Winsboro Museum, which has been a great supporter of our association. And Terry moved that $250 be given to the museum. The motion was carried. Kathy, as president, found, Kathy proposed that the keys be made for the Bible cases. Now, at the museum, the Historical Society holds the Bibles, the original Bibles from the Samuel family there, and from the Richard line, your line. So, and they're in cases, and we're proposing to lock those cases. The Historical Society there keeps those for us, and when we go there, they bring them out for viewing. But they shouldn't be handled, so the reason for the cases and put them under lock, because anyone can go in and request to see them, but they should not really be handled. just beautiful artifacts of the family. Kathy reported the cemetery grounds looks very nice, which they always have, which is the purpose of our organization. But the Winsboro blue granite, which is a beautiful blue granite, it's not found anywhere else but there. Over the years, they've been moved, disturbed for whatever the reason, and that Ken Kirkpatrick was to have these granite borders put back in their original positions. So we're still researching that. Wally Gladney, our Kentucky historian. Reported the 13 remaining genealogy books published in 1966. Wally noted that 2 additional books have not been cut by the publisher. These are the original big flyers that the publishers put in. Discussion suggested that these will be the only remaining books and that publishing any more books, genealogy books, would be overly expensive or perhaps even impossible. Copying the uncut books will require permission from publisher Tom Arnold. Wally will contact Mr. Arnold about this matter, and Kathy will contact the printer for estimate the cost of these copies. All that has been done, and the board of directors today feels sure that there is no problems in copying these books and publishing the rest of that we have, because the Arnold family has donated the rights. I'll say rights, that may not be the right word, to the Gladney Association to do that, which is wonderful on their part. Wonderful for them to do that. Wallace suggested that general attendance be apprised of the remaining books for sale, and I'm about to steal his thunder right here because I wanted to announce that. Thoughts that perhaps the purchaser might wish to donate a book to their county, state, or private organization. And just on a personal note, Judy and I have decided that we're going to buy 2 more of those genealogy books, and we're going to donate one to the Gwinnett County Library in Georgia, and we're going to donate one to the Lee County Library in Florida. So this turns out to be great research material. So think about buying one of those books, if for your personal or for your family, future use or donations. The Gladney Graham newsletter editor reported, Kathy, thank you, Kathy, 306 names on the Gladney Graham list, but only 134 paid dues. However, the Gladney Graham was sent to all 306. We didn't want to exclude anyone. Incomplete, wrong, or changed email addresses failed on 52 Gladney Grahams, which we've got some wrong email addresses. So if we get them right, it'll be wonderful. And 13 Gladney Graham was not even deliverable by U.S. mail. So we have some issues there. So maybe Kathy might tell you a little bit more about that, because she does the email and stuff later, and to make sure your email address is okay. President Newman reported that the GIA corporate filings to South Carolina are in order. However, corporate filings for exempt cemetery classifications to the IRS has expired. Government at work. Here we go. As secretary, I have filed those forms 1024 and received acknowledgement from IRS. I got a call a few days ago while Judy and I were on the road trip from the daughter that I got another letter from IRS, and it indicates that everything is okay, will be in order, and we're just going to have to file e-files, no problem, no expense. So I'll take care of that stuff. All right. So the association there is in order. Miss Lucille Gladney Brooks, Florida, term director expired, and we thanked her for her willingness to serve. She's been very faithful to us. Kevin Veach resigned position of vice president due to work, school, and personal time. And we thank Kevin for his efforts and willingness to serve. Wonderful young man. He's Kathy's son, and but he was willing, but things just got in the way. And Terry, she accepted the position of vice president for 2011-2013. Tawny accepted the directorship to complete Terry's director position for that year. We want to make a note that all past presidents are welcomed and encouraged to attend the board meetings. The past president's input is extremely important to our organizations. They have an in-depth knowledge and a foresight. But only the seated board members and officers have voting authority, so you need to know that. Do I need to go into the director's here? We're good. Kathy will tell you, well, I'll just tell you. I'm sorry, Kathy.
That's okay.
Happens. No, I'm gonna let you announce.
No, you do it. Go ahead.
I'll do it. I might get it wrong, but I'm sure you'll correct me. I hope you do. The board will remain as Tim Johnson, database manager. I'll remain as your secretary. Thank you. C. Wallace will remain as a treasurer. Wally from Kentucky, real Wally, big Wally.
I'm the big one.
You're the big Wally, real Wally. I got it. All right. Will remain historian and serve as a board member.
Do it.
Okay. Tawny Adams here has been involved with us for the last few years and very knowledgeable in genealogy with his other families and as well as the Gladneys. He will, pardon?
And has been a director.
Oh, has been a director, yes. And he will serve as, take the office as vice president for this coming year, for the next 2 years. And it is with much pleasure, really, and we just love this girl, that Terry Burkemper will be your president.
Time for a long speech, Terry.
I'm sorry?
Please snickering.
No.
Thank you to our wonderful
And
president.
we want to thank Kathy and for all of her efforts, and because she's been down. She and I, we kick this thing back around and forth with emails and stuff. I'm sure she gets tired of me sending things to her, but
No, I know.
okay. But we really appreciate Kathy. It's been wonderful under your
I've
leadership.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful. Okay, meeting was adjourned and we're
No,
all
it's not
starting
yet.
off. Not yet.
Not
That was
yet.
it. This is now.
That was your last year's adjournment?
It was.
Oh.
No,
Now our
no.
treasurer's report from Big Wally.
I finally get to say something. I've been waiting for this.
No, get it.
Charles Sidney, this is wonderful.
Yes.
I'm pointing my finger at you because you're so generous. At the moment, he's taking care of everything.
No, we're gonna reimburse.
You try and reimburse him.
I'm going to.
I know we are.
The family took care of the lunch this afternoon.
Well,
On
the
their
church
own.
did that. Anyway, we still have $13,000 in the bank we want to spend on you, see?
There you go.
Well, we've had that for years. We don't seem to get the 14,000. We don't get much below 11, so we're all right financially. Very cunning treasurer.
Creative finance.
Anyway, I'm supposed to be the jokester, but I enjoy doing it. Thank you.
Did you want to make the donation to the church?
Well, that's the deal. According to Charles Sidney, I asked everyone about today's lunch, how I pay for that. Well, he wouldn't take any money, y'all wouldn't take it. So we donated $300 to your church, your Presbyterian Church, the Zion Church, as a starter. All right? We ain't taking no from you for that. And that's something we want to do in your name, Charles. So that's good. It's hard to deal with, right?
Oh, I'm telling you. I know it.
If anybody wants any of the red books that we have printed up, I've got 4. Wally has 6. I think he has his with him tonight, and they're $20. And if we need more, we can have those printed up now.
That's the original.
Yeah, the original, the smaller red book. The big, thick blue books, you have to order those directly from the publisher, and I'm going to print their address and how to order it in the next Gladneygram. And if anybody's not getting the Gladneygram, let Terry know your email or mailing address, however you want to get it, and she'll get it to me, and I'll make sure you get put on the list. Next year's reunion, 2013, will be in Winsboro, the last full weekend in July. And our new Vice President, Tawny Adams, will be hosting in 2014 in Georgia. Thank you.
If I can make it through that.
Yeah. And one more thing I wanted to mention. We lost our oldest Gladney this year, Frances Gladney Fuller. She was 106 years old. And she passed away in Georgia. And she was Cecil Gladney's sister. And he is living now in an assisted living home. And he was on the last Gladneygram. He was on the front page. So I think our oldest living Gladney that was here today was Miss Frances Houston. Houston. And she's 96. So if anybody here is older than 90, not older than 96.
I'm getting there.
Okay. Well, I think I'll turn it over to our new president, Miss Terry Burkemper.
Yeah.
Thank everybody for coming. I hope I'm standing right here, you can see me. I hope everybody's hope it shows you a little bit of the state of Missouri. Sorry about the St. Louis traffic. Welcome to Missouri. But I hope you saw a little bit of the countryside. I don't know. We're just glad you all came. We really are. We have a treat this evening. This is Mr. Charles Kemper, a local historian. I won't give him, I tried to snowball him like I did Conrad this morning, but I won't. But he's going to tell us a little bit about the history of settling in Lincoln County.
Okay, thank you. I would not say that I'm a local historian, but I'll tell you what, Marlo knows this. Number one, I do live 4 blocks from here in a house that was built in 1904. So I've been around for a while. My name is Charles H. Kemper Jr., but in Lincoln County I'm known as Fees. And I want you to remember that because I'm going to tell you some salient facts tonight that you need to remember. Fees, of course, as you realize, a French name, it means somebody who's tall, thin, and extremely handsome. You can tell that by looking at me. Actually, it's a nonsensical name that my family stuck on me in the early 40s. Now, I am not a Gladney. You all figured that out, and I introduced myself not as a Gladney. But my family, the Kempers, came to Troy, Missouri in 1869. So we've been here for a while. My mother was a Watts from Ellsbury. And the Ellsbury Kempers, they're on both sides of my family, that'll explain me. And the Wattses came over in that area in 1834. And they settled in the New Hope area and some down south of Ellsbury where Forest Keeling Nursery is now. So I've got a little bit of heritage in Lincoln County, and I'm going to talk to you just a little bit this evening about, now not as long, I'm glad you all got to know Conrad, because Conrad and I had dinner together once or twice a month. And I was with him the other night over at Ellsbury, and you can't believe what he tells you. But he is a really super guy. And I judge that you all are Presbyterians for the most part. Well, some of you are. And some of my ancestors were Presbyterians also. However, we went wrong somewhere along the line. It became Methodist, but you know, that's beside the point. I noticed in the history of Lincoln County that Samuel Gladney came to Auburn in 1820. Are any of you kin to descended? Samuel? Okay. And apparently the Gladneys got around other places. Now the first thing I want to tell you is that he settled near Auburn. How many of you know where Auburn is? Okay, it's 11 miles north of here. The old timers call that Arbor. So we're gonna teach you how to say words in Lincoln County tonight. And that was the Arbor Junction. And my family, when we go up to Ellsbury to visit, we leave Troy and drive up to Arbor, turn right and go over to Ellsbury. And there over there, we'd see the Palmers. You know the Palmers? There's a library over there called the Palmer Library. Back in the olden days, they were called Palmers. Now, the reason I'm giving you this background is because I'm going to tell you some little known but interesting facts probably about why we're called what we are in this part of the world. Number one, and some of you all live in the St. Louis area, do you read the Post-Dispatch? No. Well, you're missing Bill McClellan. Okay. We have a columnist in the Post-Dispatch, and there's an interesting thing that we don't know how to pronounce the name of our state. And if you are in the metropolitan area or on the east side of the state, you are from Missouri. I am from Missouri. If you live in the western part of the state, in most rural areas, you are from Missouri. And there is a controversy going on continuously in the Post-Dispatch about whether it's Missouri or Missouri. Now, Mary Ann, who is from Wisconsin, calls it Missouri. I call it Missouri. So we're trying to straighten that out. Now, you are in Lincoln County, and I would assume that many of you thought when you came to Lincoln County that it was named after a farmer president, Abraham Lincoln. This is not true. The first white settler in this area was Christopher Clark. Christopher Clark came to an area down by what is now Moscow Mills, 3 miles south of here. And he came and looked around the place and went back to St. Charles County and decided that he'd like to come up here and he would like to build a cabin and settle in this area. At that time, what is now Lincoln County was part of St. Charles County. And he thought that we should change the geography of the area and possibly rename the place. So he was elected to the territorial legislature, and which was meeting in St. Charles, which was the first capital of the state of Missouri. At that time, he felt like we should break off this area up in here and be another county. So he got up, and Christopher Clark, according to the history books, was not very eloquent and did not like to speak before groups. But he rose in the legislature in St. Charles and he said, "Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we create more counties." This was before statehood. And he said, "Mr. Chairman, I was born in Linkhorn County, North Carolina. That's Linkhorn. And I lived in Linkhorn County in Old Kentucky. And I would like to have our area named Linkhorn County." The man who was taking the notes of the legislature didn't understand what he said, and he wrote down Lincoln. And so that's why it's called Lincoln County. Now, this was a long time before Abraham Lincoln, and there was a Civil War or a Revolutionary War general by the name of Benjamin Lincoln, and you may assume that probably he thought it was that Lincoln. About 5 years ago, Mary Ann and I happened to be in North Carolina, and we crossed into Lincoln County, and they call it Lincoln over there now. But this actually was Linkhorn County. Now, we go back to 1818 as far as the county goes. And the county was, of course, inhabited by Indians, the Sac and the Fox. Well, they were around, and they weren't warring Indians. They were very docile Indians, as I understand. And so the first settlement in this particular town, and I'll tell you a little bit about this town and a couple others in the county, was 3 blocks down the street in what's called in Troy the Spring Lot. Now, if you drive down there today, there's a couple of old cabins and there's a historic marker. And it was called the spring lot because there was a spring there. And everybody gathered around the spring to get their water. And the Indians kind of gathered around there. And so the settlers, who originally in this town were Joseph Cottle and Zadok Woods, they gathered down there and they looked around the spring and they started to build a little settlement around there. The War of 1812 came around, they built a fort there. And since Woods was one of the founders of the town, they called it Woods Fort. There were several forts in Lincoln County, one down at Old Monroe, and that was Fort Howard. But this was Woods Fort. Well, sometime about that time, the Indians got mad because they didn't like these white people running around telling them what to do and building houses. So they got mad and they went to Iowa and left the area. To this day, Missouri, or Missouri, is one of only 2 states in the United States that does not have any Indian-owned land. So we made them so mad all over the place, the Osage down in the southern part, the Sac and the Fox up here, that they all left and went somewhere else. Well, the war ended. Those things will happen. And the War of 1812 ended, and the locals down around Woods Fort decided not to use the fort anymore, and so they thought that they should farm some kind of a community. The guy who ran the store down here was named Robbins, and they had a meeting one day in 1819, according to the history books, although one history says it happened earlier than that, but we'll go with 1819 because that's the year that we officially celebrated in Troy. And they had a meeting, and they all decided what they would name the community. And so the storekeeper, Mr. Robbins, had come from Troy, New York. And he said, Troy is a nice name, it's short, we can spell it. So they named it that. I was talking to the American Farm Bureau president about 5 or 6 years ago, and he said, how did Troy get its name? I said, a man from Troy, New York suggested Troy, we could spell it, and that's what it went as. I said, I'm just glad that he was not from Schenectady. The next year we went to Troy, New York, and found that Schenectady is next to it. So, you know, a couple of miles it was, could have been Schenectady, and we'd have never been able to spell it. But that's what happened, and the town began to grow. Now, as I said earlier, they were down at Old Monroe. There was a settlement down there. Now, in Lincoln County, that's not called Old Monroe. The old timers down there, it's Old Monroe. All one word. And at the time it was Monroe. And that was the first county seat in Lincoln County, or Horn County. And then after that they moved it to Alexander, now known as Old Alexander, which is north of here about 5 miles. Somewhere along the line, and that date is also a little nebulous, probably in 1828, that was the last I read about it, that the county commissioners, or judges as they were called in those days, decided to move the county seat to Troy. And so that's how we've got to be the county seat. Now, for those of you that have roots over in Ellsbury, you'll know that the people in Ellsbury don't like that, and we're still at odds about that. In fact, I was in Ellsbury the other night, and we were talking about 2 groups getting together for a dinner, and I said, well, why don't you all come over to Troy? We won't do that, because you've got the county seat. Well, we've had the county seat for over 100 years, but they haven't gotten over that yet, so we're not going to get into that. Lincoln County began to develop as basically, of course, as a farming community as everything was. And even though we were close to St. Louis, which you all would call St. Louis, but we call it San Luis, like San Diego, San Jose is San Luis, we would begin to get people filtering up on that. Now, there was no Ellsbury because people lived in New Hope, which is on Highway B between 61 and Ellsbury. That was a settlement, and the other big settlement was Falmouth. And I've got Conrad Cheatham right now, even as we speak, trying to find out where Falmouth was. because I have no record and nobody seems to know. But it was down on the river someplace, and that was a river town, and it was used for shipping things on the river. There were stores, there were taverns, there were hotels, there were people that lived in Falmouth. And Falmouth and New Hope were the growing areas. Part of my family lived close to Falmouth, and part of them lived over in New Hope. Later on, they all moved to Ellsbury. Now, why did they go to Ellsbury? Well, Charlie came along and put the railroad through. And when the railroad went through, it, of course, went up where it is right now. And at that time, Robert T. Ellsbury owned the land where the railroad was going to go through. And so he sold the land to the railroad, which was the St. Louis, Keokuk, and Northwestern Railroad. Today that's the Burlington Northern Santa Fe, and it's been several other names through the years, but that's what it was at that time. And so they called the rail stop there Ellsbury. And Robert T. Ellsbury owned the land. He owned a lot of the buildings there. He was in business at one time with Ellsbury and Watts, which was my ancestor, and they had several businesses there in town. We heard a program about 3 weeks ago on Robert T. Ellsbury when we were in Ellsbury, and Robert T. Ellsbury was a Baptist. He did not believe in drinking, and he would not deal with anybody who used alcohol. He would not sell anything to anybody who used alcohol. He wouldn't even talk to people who used alcohol. And if he sold you a piece of property and found out you were drinking or making whiskey on that property, he'd take it back. He didn't put up with any of that kind of stuff. He is buried in Ellsbury, and on Long Road, just behind the Rob Guinness house, for those of you that know where Rob Guinness lives. Anybody know? Ah, we got him there, Mary Ann.
I know.
You know where Rob Guinness lives?
Yes, I
Okay. Yeah, right behind his house is the Ellsbury Family Cemetery. The Ellsburys, this is not the only community in the world named Ellsbury. Because the Ellsburys then later on, after they begin to sell out, change things, the Ellsburys moved to Bismarck, North Dakota. And somewhere northeast of Bismarck, North Dakota, was a town established called Ellsbury, being the only other Ellsbury in the United States. Well, Bill Wagner, who was the postmaster at Ellsbury for years and later the mayor for many, many years, decided that he would go to North Dakota a few years ago and go to Ellsbury. And so he drove to Ellsbury, and when he got there, he went out to where it was, and there was a sign that said Ellsbury. It's a crossroads. There's no buildings, there's no house, there's no anything. But if you ever go up there, there's a sign coming from all four directions called Ellsbury. Now, there are no Ellsburys in the area, except last year, my cousin Margaret Ann from over at Ellsbury calls me up, and she says, this was a year ago in May, she says, we have an Ellsbury coming to town. You must come over. So I went over, and we had lunch with a lady whose maiden name was Ellsbury, who lives in Pear, South Dakota now, who was originally from Bismarck, North Dakota, and she is in Ellsbury, and there still are a few Ellsburys up there. So Ellsbury is not nearly as old as Troy, and there is still a rivalry that goes back many, many years. And I've always been able to be accepted in Ellsbury because my mother's family is from Ellsbury, so I could get into town. At the 125th anniversary, we had a float in the parade, and it was the Kemper Watts Elliott float. Now, as I said, I have Kempers on both sides. My great-grandfather was Eliza Kemper, who was grandmother, who was the daughter of French Florrie Kemper. So I was accepted, except that as we were riding in the parade that day, well, I didn't tell you a lot on my character. I was the mayor of Troy for 24 years. I retired 2 years ago this past April, and I finally got enough sense to think that I don't think I want to be mayor anymore. And I'm riding on the float with some other relatives, the Watsons, the Elliots, waving at everybody, and they're all saying, "What's that yahoo from Troy doing over here? He shouldn't be allowed in town." Well, I had a lot of explaining to do. There was a nice dinner at the Methodist Church that afternoon, and we went there, and I had to explain to everybody in there why I was allowed to come into Ellsbury and ride on a float during the 125th anniversary. So that's kind of, I have a book which has 628 pages on the history of Lincoln County. And I was going to bring that tonight, and I was going to read some of it to you, but I don't think you wanted to listen to it. It would take you all night. But these are some of the things. So, and you all now know where Auburn is, about the farmers. Open Row. Oh, Missouri's a weird place too. We can't pronounce anything. We don't know what the name of our state is, whether it's Missouri or Missouri. But we have some other towns. If you ever been to France, you go to Versailles, or in Missouri, you go to Versailles. You can go out west to Nevada, or you can go in the west part of the state to Nevada, instead of Nevada. You can go to Spain and go to Madrid, or you can go into southeast Missouri and go to New Madrid. So whatever it was, if it was pronounced some way in another part of the world, it is not pronounced the same way in Missouri/Missouri. Just to bring you up to speed a little bit on Lincoln County, or Lake Hard County, the official name should have been. This is the second fastest growing county in the state of Missouri, and has had a tremendous population increase. When I grew up here, and I don't want to tell you how old I am, but my high school class, a week from tonight, will be in this room with our 55th anniversary of our graduation of Buchanan High School here. So, but I was a boy genius, so I was very young. But we've had rapid growth. When I was a kid, the county had about 12,000, 13,000 people. Now we have 54,000. The town of Troy had 1,200 people when I was growing up. Now we have 11,000. Ellsbury has not had the rapid growth that we have in this part of the county. And the dynamics of this county have changed considerably. This was, of course, a rural farming area. And the northern part of the county still is a rural farming area. The southern part of the county, which would be Winfield, Troy, Hawk Point, Moscow Mills through this area, is now a suburban area. So when you go home and they say, "Where have you been?" you can say, "Well, you've been to one of the suburbs of St. Louis," because the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, has included Lincoln County now in what's called the Standard Metropolitan Statistical Area, which means, along with Franklin County, we are now an urban area. And so we have changed quite a bit. Well, that gives you just a little bit of what's going on. Lincoln County has made a lot of progress through the years, and if you did take the Post-Dispatch, or you did get St. Louis television, you would probably notice that we now make the news a lot in Lincoln County, because